So the next session is about regulation, and I'd like to introduce you Mike Schnorr. He's the public relation manager of Yakuna, right? And you are moderating the next session.
Yeah. Thanks. We're going to get a table here, and today's topic is, of course, regulation, specifically in Germany. And I'd like to invite my panel. First of all, Tanja Aschenbeck-Glorange. She's a partner at Osborne and Clark. Thanks for joining us. Hi. And yeah, please applaud. And as next, I'd like to invite Lutz Aufenberg. He's attorney at Vinheller. And last but not least, Lutz Keller. He's, well, a board member of the Federal Association for Bitcoins in Germany. Please welcome him. Levin Keller, I'm sorry. All right, so at first I'd suggest all of you take a minute and introduce yourself, your company, and maybe use that one.
Oh, yep. Thank you. Yes, you already made it. You may pronounce my name correctly, which is very good. So my name is Tanja Aschenbeck from Osborne Clark here. I'm based in Cologne. Osborne Clark is an international law firm and tax advisors, mainly in Europe, but also in the US, though we don't advise in the US. But we promote a lot of US companies coming into Europe, especially also in Germany. I'm specialized in payment regulation and financial regulation in general, like also crowdfunding. So I see a big link between crowdfunding and Bitcoin. I think we will hear about that later today. And yeah, I'm happy to talk here about regulatory issues in Germany and in Europe.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Lutz Aufenberg, attorney at law from Frankfurt. I'm working for the Vinheller law firm. We are Frankfurt based, and also working in the field of banking law and capital markets law, especially on the financial supervision of Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. And yes, I'm also happy to be here, and I think we're gonna have a nice chat.
Thanks. My name is Levin Keller. I'm a board member of the Bundesverband Bitcoin e.V., which is a lobby group founded in the end of last year. Yeah, we focus on lobbying for Bitcoin and preventing bad regulation happening for Bitcoin in Germany and Europe. Currently, I'm personally very much occupied with the situation of the ECJ ruling about the VAT taxation of Bitcoin. So there's a lawsuit at the ECJ about whether or not Bitcoin should be VAT or subject to VAT all over Europe. That's something we want to try to avoid, where we try to get voices out of the community, voices maybe within the government to intervene that decision. That's what I'm working on, what I'm interested in, and also, of course, anti-money laundering regulation that might strangle Bitcoin in its infancy. Yes.
All right, thanks. And I'd like to start our discussion with a question for Tanja. Perhaps you can explain us the current situation of regulation here in Germany. How does this impact the digital, currency society?
Okay, so actually what we have in Germany is quite interesting because it's different from most of the other European countries as usual. We call it the German extra sausage. What we have in Germany, we don't consider Bitcoins as money. So you can read it sometimes, or they call it private money. You can read different things in the publications. But what the German supervisory authority does, they say it's not electronic money, it's not money at all, so it's not regulated by the Payment Services Directive, by payment. It's not considered to be money, but instead it's called units of account, which is something very specific German. That means that they are treated as financial instruments. That means that the mining is not regulated at all. It's not regulated to use it as money, so to go somewhere and to buy something by means of Bitcoins. But what is regulated in Germany is a trade of Bitcoins. That means that every kind of marketplace or trading platform or whatever is regulated in Germany, since they are trading units of accounts, which means investment instruments. That is totally different. We will talk about other countries, I think, later, but it's different from other European countries, and it's hard to explain this, I can tell, to especially US clients, that this happens here in Germany.
Okay. Lutz, sorry. How would you define the regulation here in Germany? Where's the beef?
Yeah, actually, okay, Tanya already told you that BaFin, the financial authority here in Germany, considers Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies as units of account, so Rechnungseinheiten. So they are regulated right now, but still, I want to add that this is the view on it of the authority, and until now, no judge has ever took a look on it. So it's not said that that will last forever. Once there is somebody who wants to clarify this in courts, it might be different one day. But still, if you ask me for the long term, I'm pretty sure that the legislator will react all over Europe, actually. I hope it will be homogeneously. And we will have a homogeneous regulation situation in all over Europe then.
All right. Levin, how would you consider a regulation from your point of view as association for Bitcoins?
Yeah, okay, so I could go on for hours about this topic, of course, and for this reason, yeah. But so, yeah, the question also is always, what is regulation? So does a marketplace implement KYC, so know your customer and anti-money laundering, I don't know, measures? Yeah, so knowing who his customers are and so on. So this is just, I think, to a certain degree, a good measure of good business to avoid money laundering, for example. So this will be something that regulation will be enforced, and it is already in place. And it's just not out of the question to go without this kind of regulation for a professional exchange, I'd say. But the thing is, so where do we go beyond that? So there could be regulations in Bitcoin that are different from the current system. So let's say, for example, BitLicense is something that goes this way, to actually make track of every movement within the blockchain and being able to attach a name to every single transaction, stuff like that. In theory, this might be an approach that the government would like to take, but we are, of course, heavily opposed to it. That would just kill Bitcoin and end the usage of it. And so these are like upcoming next steps, I think, that regulators might want to take. We also see this coming from the EBA statement, where they also talk about some kind of central clearinghouse that should, if there is doubt about the legality of a transaction or so, then intervene and so on. These are ideas that are completely against Bitcoin, and but they will never be able to impose them. So we try to avoid I don't know, the waste of money in this area from the government, also just to try to impose them in the beginning.
In terms of time, how would you say, how long will it take to have a regulated market in Germany or in the European Union? 1 year, 2 months, 10 years?
Actually, what we have currently, we are already Bitcoin are already regulated in Germany. So the trade. Most of the other European countries don't consider Bitcoins as money, and also they don't have something like units of account. So actually, for example, in the UK, or I know in Denmark, there is no regulation. I think also in Netherlands, we have somebody here from Netherlands. I think it's also not regulated there. So what is, if you ask for a European regulation, let me tell you about my experience, how long it takes until first we have the decision, and then we have it made on the European side, and then we have it implemented in Germany, or in the member states. Even if now they might think about a European regulation, it would take at least 5 years. So I wouldn't expect that. But what I would expect maybe is that the different supervisory authorities from the different European countries might try to coordinate their regulation without a real European regulation in place.
Yes, actually, I think the same thing. Of course, politics really take a long time. So to see a homogeneous regulation of businesses with bitcoins all over Europe will take at least 5 years, maybe 10 years or something like that. But still, we can do a lot with the existing laws in Germany and all over Europe. That's what I mean, because in most places in Europe, we have the system of the codified law. So we already have existing rules, but of course, when those rules were invented, people did not think about bitcoins at that time, because bitcoins, that's a young industry, that's a young phenomenon. So you have to be very, well, innovative or something like that, and try to get a solution out of the existing law. And up to every idea you can have, you will have to find a solution there. And of course, the authorities will have to work together closely and see if they can find a solution which is supposed to be valid for every member state of the European Union. But that's really, really, really difficult to achieve.
So I think at the time being, regulation only is on the off and on ramps. So on ramps are the exchanges where I can buy Bitcoin. Off ramps are like BitPay, something where I can sell Bitcoin off. These are regulated, but the system Bitcoin itself is not regulated. And actually, there's not much leverage to like regulate it at all. You cannot just tell the miners do something else as you're doing. You won't get them all in the end. So this is the question. Yeah. So right now, I think we have already a regulated market for Bitcoin, like for trading Bitcoin in Germany and all over Europe, which is to a certain degree fine. The question is whether or not the government wants to increase this regulation and maybe use for that the definition of money on Bitcoin, so extend the definition of money to Bitcoin. But then you get other problems like maybe the VAT exemption and so on. So everything comes with pros and cons to a certain degree. I think for the time being, we would be fine if it weren't for the VAT issue. We'll see how that works out in the end. I personally think there's enough regulation already, and it's regulated well. And yeah.
Right. Levin, could you perhaps delve a little bit deeper in this VAT topic, which you are well fighting for?
I won't maybe go into it too much, but the question is, so does VAT apply or not on Bitcoin selling? So let's say I'm a merchant and accepting 10 euros worth of Bitcoin as a payment for my 3 beers that I sell you. So then I of course pay VAT for the beers that I sold, so around 2 euros or 1.90 euro. And but I have these 10 Bitcoins in my holdings as a merchant, and if I sell them again to some third party because I need to rebuy new beer or so, then it might be the case that I pay another 19% of VAT. And this, of course, kills Bitcoin as a medium of exchange for merchants. It doesn't really work anymore. It will be driven in the underground. The usage will not stop, but the tax declaration will stop, of course. There will be circumventions like BitPay, for example, could be a way around this because merchants never actually hold the Bitcoins. Stuff like that is going to happen. And so the problem is that in the VAT law, money and such stuff is excluded. So shares, bonds, money, like also gold in certain circumstances is exempt from VAT. And the money definition doesn't hold with Bitcoin yet. And if it were to come to that Bitcoin is also like treated like money, then the VAT exemption would also grasp for Bitcoin, and this would be a way to go. But so the usage would be easier, broader, quicker. That's also something that maybe the government and the regulators don't want to see. So they're a little bit in between the decisions.
I think I don't want to go into the VAT issue too much because I'm not a tax expert, but the problem is exactly what we talked about at the beginning. Is it money or treated as money, or is it not? So what we have in Germany, our supervisory authorities tell us it's not money. Therefore, it's not regulated as money, and therefore, for VAT reasons, I guess it's not treated as money. On the other side, we have it treated as units as account, as financial instruments, which means that's why we are only regulating the trade. On the other side, if the government or the supervisory authority would say, oh, it's money, then it will be regulated under the supervisor of the Payment Services Directive, which means, for example, that every transfer of Bitcoins would be regulated, etc. So you either have one bad thing, either it's regulated as money, then you have the Payment Services Directive, and then you might have the exemption from VAT, or you have it as financial instrument as currently, but then you have the VAT issue. So it will be hard to have both good sides.
Just one little thing. It's also possible that the tax authority and the financial supervision authority do have a different view to make it more complicated. So in this situation, actually, both is possible. Everything is possible, actually.
How would this work on a global scale? Because Bitcoin is no national thing. How can this work out in the future?
Yeah, that's the problem. But of course, every single state has his own answer to the phenomenon Bitcoins and has to do something about it. So look if rules are applicable or not. But in the end, they cannot find a global solution for it because they have their own laws and who might be applicable. We don't have any world law or something like that which could be applicable. Yeah, so.
All right.
Yeah, so just to come back to this idea of regulating each and every Bitcoin transaction is just ridiculous. And he was thinking that this is applicable in the future. He doesn't get Bitcoin. And it's also something that I see from regulators, which I'm personally a little concerned about, especially the EBA ruling that came out. So this advisory for banks to stay away from Bitcoin, and the showing about 70 risks or so-called risks, like I forget my password, I can't access my Bitcoin. Very good, but not a risk at all for me personally. But so the point is the government right now thinks that they can like regulate Bitcoin and say, and miners need to check every transaction whether or not both of the parties are known to them, stuff like that. Is never going to happen. And we need to think beyond that. We need to think, how do we actually use such a tool without regulation, because we cannot regulate it, instead of thinking that we can just put the old measures that we have onto this new technology. This is the way to go, I find personally, and I'm a little concerned that the government and so that the government and also the EBA and so on don't really get the point that Bitcoin is beyond regulation, at least at a certain level, like the transaction level.
You just mentioned the EBA and their warning. How do you as association want to fight against that? What are your next steps? How do you plan to, well, get rid of that warning or discouragement for banks and payment providers to use Bitcoins? Because many are opening for Bitcoins. PayPal or eBay a few weeks ago announced it as a marketing deal, or for example. So what are your plans to, well, get into, well, the government deeply and, well, soothe the whole situation?
So Bitcoin is a grassroots thing, I'd say. So I don't need to go to the government and convince them. I'll convince. So education, education, education. We are running around telling people about Bitcoin, how it's used, how it's securely installed and everything. And I think this is the way to go. So I think about, so we have the separation between religion and the government. We had this centuries ago. And now we're at the point where we want to separate money from the government. And so it will be like, the government will be quite for a while like the Catholic Church and tell us, oh, you go to hell if you don't use our system. But others will see benefits from it, and big companies will see benefits from it. They'll lobby. They'll maybe also use support us in lobbying for Bitcoin. But the most important thing is to make people understand what Bitcoin is about, what the benefits are from Bitcoin, because maybe there will be some time when the decision comes for like voters that one party is for Bitcoin and the other one is wants to ban Bitcoin, maybe, or such a thing. So then we need to make the people understand the benefits of Bitcoin, so they are not afraid of voting yes, we want Bitcoin, we want this as a society. But I don't think that we'll get the old like the old banks and so on onto the Bitcoin track easily, because they have a lot at stake if the usage of Bitcoin gets too broad.
All right. Yeah, please.
I would like to add something with regard to the warnings, because also BaFin, or German Supervisory Authority, they published an article about Bitcoins in the beginning of the year, and they also, it was included a warning to the consumers: be aware of the risk of Bitcoins. And actually, I'm happy about that. I think that's a very, very good approach. So if you're thinking about the, let me say, stupid consumer who always claim about that there was fraud, or say somebody didn't tell them the truth, like for example with Procon. Everybody knows Procon. Everybody who was interested and read the newspaper knew that there were tons of warnings. Don't invest into Procon. And the people still did it, and now they claim, oh, nobody told me. So I'm happy if the supervisory authority gives warnings, so later nobody can tell, no, nobody told me. They should make an informed decision. So exactly as you say, inform them, give them all information so the people make an informed decision once they decide to treat or to handle or do anything with Bitcoins. Then later, if something goes wrong, nobody can claim nobody told me.
Yeah, just a few words on the warning of the EBA. Those were 70 risks, I think, they mentioned. Yeah, but as you said, it's for example, I forgot my password or something like that. Most of the risks apply to usual currencies also, or to other things, for example, email accounts or something like that. So it's not really 70 risks they issued, but still they just wanted to tell everybody, so everybody would be informed. Because, for example, before the Mt. Gox catastrophe happened, for example, maybe a lot of people didn't know about the risks of Bitcoin, or would now say that they didn't know about it. So yeah, it's not a problem that they issued those warnings, I think.
Okay, so the warning is quite a good thing to inform the public about potential risks of Bitcoins. In the end, nobody can say, I didn't know, hopefully. On the other hand, to get back to regulation, the New York State recently introduced the first draft for a specific, Bitcoin regulation. How would you, rate this? Is it perhaps a possible example for an adaptation for the German market?
So I don't think so. I think our German regulation is good that we have. We have anti-money laundering, we have KYC rules. If there's a trade with Bitcoins, I think it's good what we have. But actually, I think that we should expect some more, like in the state of New York City, the first draft of the new law provides for regulation for every kind of service around Bitcoin. So this is very, very broad. I think the online wallet, everybody will be regulated under that, and they want to the KYC rules, the Know Your Customer rules, are implemented for all kinds of services. So this will be much more than we have currently in Germany, but I expect other states or countries to follow on the New York line.
Yeah, I totally agree. The only thing I want to add is that it would be good if we would have such a draft just to clarify what Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies are in Europe. So that would be helping. That would be very good. But yeah, I think the existing laws, once Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies would be seen as financial instruments all over Europe, that will be sufficient.
Yeah, to sum up the bit license, the first draft, for me it's a joke. There's nothing more to say, or not more to say about it, because if this were applied, then Bitcoin would be so expensive for any business to use that they would be better off with the old system. And also, I personally question the motivation behind this draft. The thing is that, so this bit license holds for any business that wants to handle Bitcoins on behalf of their customers, which is already not a bad idea to have some kind of certain rules for these businesses, as we have seen with Mt. Gox. They should maybe show that they have the funds that they claim they have and so on, but we can all reach this through the blockchain. We can just have multi-signature wallets in there, and the total transparency of all the funds of the exchange and so on is easily done with Bitcoin. No need to worry there. But so all the other regulation issues that come up with, and having, so you need all the profits have to be, you cannot hold the profits of the company in Bitcoin. You have to invest it in like high quality investments like US Treasury bonds. which I personally would avoid as much as I can. Yeah. So I don't think that this is something that they need to meddle with. What the business does, where the business holds his profit, their profits, and so in the end, this is applicable on these kind of businesses. But if you're a bank, you don't need the BIT license. So what actually, personally, I think the motivation is behind that to just cut out all the small companies that are coming up and using Bitcoin and just trying to only make the banks able to handle Bitcoin in bulk. And this is a way I really personally am afraid of that will be also maybe try to be copied here in Germany. I think even this ruling won't go through in New York. If it does, then New York just becomes a black spot on the land on the map for Bitcoin. Nobody will, all the users with New York IPs will just be banned from every Bitcoin service, and this will be about it. So people from New York will claim, well, will be sour, will be angry about this regulation, I think.
Do you believe that, for instance, Germany can become a paradise for Bitcoiners?
I hope so. I definitely hope so, and I will keep on working every day for that to happen. But of course, we have threats. We have threats from regulators. We have threats from people misunderstanding Bitcoins. It's very easy to denounce Bitcoin as, I don't know, money for drugs and child pornography and even terrorism. Yeah, so that's the usual way people go at Bitcoin, and it's very easy. The other way around is takes more time to explain why it's beneficial and so on, while the old system is a little, to a certain degree, broken, and maybe they'll adapt and be better in the future, but right now Bitcoin has huge benefits over the old system. But this is difficult for people to understand, and we need this broad usage of Bitcoin. We need to make people know about Bitcoin, to like it. Actually, that's one of the biggest problems right now. People don't really like Bitcoin. They think it's just some, usually I think the most the Ponzi scheme, people getting rich, and then now they're happy about being rich, but nobody wants, so the people are a little afraid to join. But once they've joined it, and then they're all about Bitcoin, that's the usual way it goes. So I think that's reasonable to expect people using Bitcoin, but they need to be using Bitcoin before regulation comes in hard on Bitcoin. And if that happens, I think Germany is a tech-savvy country. A lot of young people also critical about inflation and so on. So there might be a lot of reasons for people in Germany to like Bitcoin, and then they might also be for Bitcoin, and maybe it will become a paradise. Who knows?
What do you think?
I think for the long term, we will have a regulation of Bitcoins all over the world. There's no other solution to it. And from that point of view, I would say that Germany is a good place for young startups at the moment, because already in 2011, the German Financial Supervision Authority issued a statement about their view on Bitcoins to be financial instruments, units of accounts. So people know about the situation, about the legal situation in Germany. Other countries were not too sure about it, or didn't even say anything about it. So everybody who wanted to create any business in relation to Bitcoins or other cryptographic currencies didn't know if probably at some point a license would be required for the business. And once an authority decides you will need a license for what you do now, that's incredibly that's really a lot of work, and it costs a lot of money to get this license, and to hold the license is also a lot of work and very expensive. So for young startups, that's the death.
So let's imagine companies entering the European market, especially Germany. What are the risks? You mentioned, of course, the high license fees. Other problems entering Germany from outside?
Okay, take this one. Yeah, actually, this is what we expect very often, especially with regard to Bitcoins, but also to other regulatory questions. When companies come from the US, they come to Europe and they think we have one closed shop here and we have one regulation. They say, you have European directives and that's it. So, and then they start to talk to me in Germany and to my colleague in the UK and then to the colleague in the Netherlands, and everybody claims to have the same directive, but a totally different implementation and interpretation in its member state, which totally confuses every US company and which really frustrates them. and it's really, really hard for them to enter the European market because they need all the advice for every other country, member state, which is very expensive, and sometimes we have totally different interpretations. So one supervisory authority in Germany says, yeah, it's regulated. Another country says, no, it's not regulated. Because it's not regulated, you're not allowed to get a license. So they come up very, very confusing solutions.
Yeah, no, nothing to add. Actually, that's the problem, yeah. Yeah, of course, we do have a European passport, which would be a solution for startups to get a license for the business here in Germany. And then once, for example, the Netherlands decide to regulate Bitcoins as well, they could easily just give notice to the authority in the Netherlands and to BaFin that they want to provide their services to the Dutch market as well. And then they do not need an own complete license there, but it's easier to get, and it's much quicker. Yeah, and they can provide their services in a different member state then too.
Yeah, so this whole question of regulation and I don't know, coming to Germany or the EU as a foreign startup or company, whatever, and whether or not it's possible. And the problems begin only when you start touching fiat. If you don't handle fiat, you are either not regulated, or if you would be regulated in Germany, you just do it wherever you want, and crypto will always reach you. So there's no blocking system for crypto transactions and so on. So I know all these betting websites, they work somewhere. It doesn't matter. People make their profits, and the government just loses out on the tax returns. And what's also very important to state is that if you want to use Bitcoin as a merchant, if you want to pay, I don't know, your customers or get money from your customers with Bitcoin, you're not regulated at all in Germany. You can do whatever you want. And also all over Europe. The biggest threat here is, as I said, the VAT issue, but not so much the regulation. And so if a company is, I don't know, is working in Germany already and shipping stuff, delivering services, whatever, they can accept Bitcoin as a means of payment. They don't need to bother at all about regulation and so on. So I find this is a very good situation right now. And only these on and off ramps and maybe somebody who's issuing credits or something, I don't know, like giving out loans in Bitcoin and such stuff, these people are regulated because they kind of act like a bank, but the others don't. And I think personally, the banks or people that try to be banks in the Bitcoin realm also should be subject to some scrutiny.
I think it's quite dangerous to say that once you do not touch fiat, you're not regulated. If I got you right, yeah, okay. Because, for example, if you take the financial service of a brokerage, it's only it's not buying and selling Bitcoins, or it's not buying and selling financial instruments, but it's just giving advice on getting financial instruments from a third party. So that has nothing to do with fiat, and still it would be regulated as the service.
Yeah, no, of course it will be regulated or so like Europe is thinking that they could regulate it, but I just open up a hidden service on Tor and do whatever I want. So not me personally, but people will do. So this is a realm you cannot regulate. So financial instruments just based on crypto are, of course, from the legal point of view, to be regulated, but in fact they can't be regulated. You see BTCE, for example, is an exchange, nobody knows actually who's owning it, but it's working fine, has high volume and everything. So this is what I in German call the normative Kraft des Faktischen. Yeah. So we will in the end we'll just, so these companies will not settle down in Europe and we are a legal company or so. These profits will just be in the realm of cryptocurrencies. But as soon as you touch fiat in Europe and you want your customers to be able to wire your money and so on, then you need to be regulated. But because if not, you'll prosecute it. They will block your bank's accounts and so on and so on. So I know that all the others are in theory also regulated, but they don't care about it. They don't need to care about it to a certain degree. If they're not living in Europe and so on, they don't really give a shit. But they have a lot of customers here in Europe.
Sorry, I must contradict a little bit. It's not easy to say they are not regulated. They are regulated. When they address the German market, they are regulated, and it's a crime what they are doing. But the supervisory authority cannot get them because they are not based here. So it's a little bit. They are regulated. So we have a lot of No, not clients. We have a lot of people that don't become our clients that want some advice, and we tell them, no, you're regulated once you address the German market or the European market. Then they have those kind of ideas. Oh, I stay at the Bahamas, so nobody can get me. I'm like, okay. So, but this is not serious business that you are doing here in Europe. So you should be aware of that. And I think it's not good for the whole Bitcoin scene if there are too many of those, because this will confirm the fear of the regulators to say, look at them, they are criminals. So they don't go along with our regulations. So I think it would be better that there's serious business coming to Europe saying, okay, this is a regulation that we can go along with in Germany, and I think it's a good regulation that we have currently, and then it becomes a serious business. And so the regulators don't say, oh, we have to prohibit it totally, or we have to regulate even more.
So perhaps a last question, because time is running out, I think. How would you convince my mother to use a digital wallet to pay in Bitcoin with security, trust versus Cayman Islands?
I think that's absolutely the job for Levin.
So yeah, maybe your mother is really a difficult person to approach. I don't.
Normal customer.
My mother would. Yeah. So, but what would be the benefit that your mother had? And that's something I see as in the moment also as a real big problem. So to convince people to use Bitcoin, there would be an argument. You can save a lot of money if you pay here and there, but that's actually not the case. So if I were to buy my pizza at lieferservice.de, and the pizza is €8.50 with the credit card, but €7.50 in Bitcoin, then I would have a strong argument, maybe for your mother as she likes pizza, I don't know. But so I would have an argument to say, okay, it's better for you to use Bitcoin because you're saving on money. And the merchants right now, they're all just taking these profits that they get from Bitcoin payments for themselves, maybe because they need to amortize or to get back the money that they invested in the payment system itself, hiring further developers and so on. But in the end, we need like this 1 or 2% reduction on the price if you pay with Bitcoin. It's already starting, like for flight company, and so yeah, so they bring you €6 reduction if you pay with Bitcoin and so on. So this will be the argument also maybe for your mother. The ease of use must be increased. There are easy to use wallets out there, but you need to worry a lot about how do I secure my private keys, what is a private key, and so on. This needs to be easier for the people. I'm also thinking about hardware wallets and so on, so it's easier to set it up in a secure way. But the strongest argument would be you can save on money. Or what's also an argument is maybe if she has relatives outside of the European Union or so, she can easily and cheaply send money over there. But for that, also the exchanges need to increase in in other countries like Schweden and so on.
All right, then I'd like to thank you three for having this wonderful panel discussion. And if we've got a few more minutes, I hope, perhaps 3 questions from the audience. There.
Hello, Erkki Alama once more. We heard a lot about that. Should be Bitcoin as money, or what it is exactly? And I don't want to ask it once more, but I'm interested about your personal opinion about that. If Bitcoin would be medium for payments, that means money, can it survive?
Can it survive?
Well, yes, I think so, actually. I don't really understand where your question goes, because do you mean will it survive and still be on the market, or what do you mean exactly?
So yeah. About the scalability of the Bitcoin network. Okay, yeah. I didn't really get it in the beginning too, but so this is an issue that's heavily discussed and the technical one, not so much about regulation. I personally think, so what I read is that the scalability is far from being like the problem right now. We can handle a lot of transactions. I think that in the end, Bitcoin might become some kind of reserve money and be only used for very big transactions. But there are a lot of other protocols that copy Bitcoin to a certain degree that are also cheap to use. Which will be then used in certain areas maybe. So maybe there'll be a German Bitcoin and a French Bitcoin, and then there'll be like on the blockchain exchanges so that you transparently transfer just German Bitcoins when you're on holiday in France. You don't really care. You just see the prices in your own currency. Something like that will work. Not everything will be always in the blockchain. We'll just blow it up to the immensely, but we'll find solutions for that. I'm sure, but this is technical and not so much about regulation, I'd say.
Hi, my name is Jens Hansen. I'm doing future science. I'm interested, you were always talking at the moment about copy-paste regulations from like Euro to the Bitcoin, but what about, I mean, all these institutions are like from Germany, we're making it for our own currency, but what are the rules for the Bitcoin? I mean, making rules to make Bitcoin safer, and it's totally different than make Euro safer. So now you're talking always about copy paste old rules, but now we have a new system, and how can we protect the Bitcoin with our own regulations, like community regulations?
So this is exactly okay. This is exactly what happened in Germany. They took the old law that we already had from a time where nobody knew and thought about Bitcoins. And then they said there were these units of accounts. And before Bitcoins exist, nobody knew what are units of accounts. I don't know if they really exist. Somebody wrote it into the law. And then Bitcoin up, and somehow our supervisory authority decided, oh, Bitcoin, they are units of accounts. So they are financial instruments. That's it. But with regard to the scope of the authority of BaFin, our supervisory authority, they don't only have, they are not only competent to look at the euro, they are competent or to look at all and regulate all financial business in Germany. So they are competent to regulate and to talk about Bitcoins.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So where do we go from here? How do we find new approaches to it and so on? I personally would say, so all this old idea of regulation is done with Bitcoin. And the next question is how you said you want to make Bitcoin safer. I don't personally see the need, but when the BaFin or the EBA thinks that Bitcoin needs to be safer, they're very much invited to write a Bitcoin improvement proposal and force or face the community about it. So they're just one other entity in this big sea now. They're just one small fish like all the others of us, and we'll need to agree on rules there. And in the end, I think the regulation will be done through the Bitcoin network via the protocol, and that will be about it. You cannot have more regulation because you would mess with the protocol itself.
Just to make it clear once more, it's not Bitcoins that are regulated, but it's the businesses around or in relation to Bitcoins. So it doesn't make a difference if you do brokerage services, for example, in relation to shares or options or whatever, or in regard or in relation to Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies. So it's only the financial services that are regulated. And Bitcoins are considered, well, to make it easy, from the view of BaFin, just as units of accounts, and therefore comparable to shares or other financial instruments, you could say.
I know who had the last question, and it was you, Andreas.
It's me, Andreas, again. So it's obvious that the current state of regulation in Germany is not the current state that we would like to have in future. The commodity side, we would like to have it in a currency. But I was missing the part where, for example, I'm sorry I forgot your name, from Bitcoin Foundation Germany, where you are stepping in and trying to talk to BaFin how we would approach the future steps to regulate it in a currency way. And to additional, we're living in the 21st century, and if we would like to have it into a currency state, the whole Bitcoin system, we would have to treat it as a currency, and we would have to have the same regulations as a typical currency. Where would we have to step in, and which judge would we have to talk to talk to the BaFin and maybe change the current state of regulation?
Of course, that's yeah. So we are talking to people and educating also policymakers, lawmakers, and so on about Bitcoin. I don't see much of a leverage to a judge or so. I think that the current so you need to change the law. It's not the law that says Bitcoin is currency or so. So it's more about policymakers and politicians that we need to approach. We are approaching them, but this is what I said. So politicians, they're not acting on their own will, at least not usually, but only because they are forced by the voters to do it. And this is more the approach that I would take. We are educating politicians whenever we get the chance. We're talking to them. And we also try to leverage this ECJ court ruling now that's going to happen to force some reaction. Also, the government now is really not much interested in Bitcoin. That's where we are going right now. But I don't think that the BaFin will eventually say, yeah, Bitcoin is great, and we'll find a way to use it and to regulate it and so on. They'll always be against Bitcoin if they do what they're supposed to do, control like the money market.
Sorry, I just have to answer one sentence to that, because I totally see the point that you want to have Bitcoin treated as a currency from a tax point of view, but you really don't want it from a regulatory point of view, because I'm pretty sure that this would kill at least 50% of the Bitcoin market if it was treated and regulated as a currency. So actually we are happy in Germany that it's not treated as a currency or as money.
Well, in that case, I got the signal to cut the questions. I'm deeply sorry, but I believe in the next coffee break, our panelists will be happy to answer your individual requests. I'd like to thank Levin for participating, Lutz, of course, and Tanya. And now, please get up to take over.